different areas. So developers build the core structure of a website using complex coding languages, while the designers are more visually creative, focusing on the user. Hi everyone, this is Shantini from Edureka, and in today's session, we will talk about web developer and web designer and what are the key differences between these two. Now, before we begin the session, let's have a look at today's agenda. So first we will see what is web development, and then we will see who is a web developer and who is a web designer. Then moving on, we will discuss about the different key roles and the key differences between a web developer and a web designer. And finally, we will also have a look at the salary trends of a developer and a designer. Now, before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Edureka's YouTube channel to stay connected. Now, what is web development actually? So, web development is the task that is associated with developing websites for hosting via intranet or the internet. Now, the web development process involves web design, web content development, client-side or server-side scripting, and network security configuration. So, a website can either be a simple one-page site or it could be an incredibly complex web application. So when you view your website on the web in a browser, it is because of all the processes involved in web development. So now that you've understood what is web development, let's move on and discuss about who is actually a web developer. Now, a web developer is actually a programmer who specializes in the development of the World Wide Web applications using a client-server model. Now, they're also responsible for designing, coding, and modifying websites from layout to function and according to a client's specifications. So, web developers usually just focus on a few languages. So, you can either focus on the front-end programming of a website using the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or on the server-side programmings like the PHP, Java, Ruby, and .NET. Now, there are different job profiles of a web developer as well. So, talking about the different roles, we have the front-end developer role. Now, front-end development is known as client-side development. So, it mostly involves programming all the public-facing visuals and elements as part of a website's design. So, front-end developers often have to collaborate with web designers. Also, they must have strong programming skills such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as they work with elements that are visible to the users. Now, this was about the front-end developers. Apart from that, there is another role known as the back-end developer. Now, back-end refers to the hidden layer that the users can't see when they visit a website. So they must have strong programming skills because the back-end layer forms a dynamic connection between the front end and the database. Now, to get this layer working, it's important to know at least one of the programming languages such as Python, Java, PHP, SQL, C Sharp, Ruby, etc. And also you need the knowledge of server-side frameworks such as Node.js. And finally, we have a full stack developer. Now, you can either work with the front end or the back end, or you can also work with both of these together, which is full stack web development. Now, a full stack web developer is someone who has a good understanding of how the web works at each and every level. So, including setting up and configuring Linux or Windows servers, coding server-side APIs, running the client side of the application by using the JavaScript, operating and querying databases, and structuring and designing the web page with CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. So these were the different works of a front-end, back-end, or a full-stack web developer. And combining all of these, this was the task of a web developer. So now that you have understood who is a web developer, let's move on and see who is a web designer. Now, web designers create layouts that are visually pleasing for visitors. So, the work of a web designer is critical in making sure that visitors spend more time on a website. They analyze the latest trends in web design, respect design principles and norms, follow what the users expect when visiting a website. Not just that, web designers also focus on adding branding elements on a website without making them too abrupt compared to the rest of the design. Since web design covers a lot of responsibilities, web designers can specialize in specific areas of the website. Now, there are different job profiles for a web designer as well. Now, talking about the roles, the first one is the UI designers. So, the user interface designers, that is, the UI designers, are the ones who deal with user interaction. They make sure that users are able to interact with the elements that are present on the website. The user interface is everything that a visitor sees when they access a website, and it needs to be designed in a manner so that it fits the user's expected workflow. Now, apart from UI designers, there's another role called as the UX designers. Mostly you have seen the roles to be UI UX designers, so you can either specialize as a UI designer or a UX designer. Now, the user experience designers, that is the UX designers, make sure that your website is able to keep the visitors engaged. Now, they analyze data before finalizing any design on the website. Also, the UX designers run complex tests and restructure the websites when needed to keep the user experience optimal. Now, apart from the UI UX designers, we have visual designers as well. Now, when we combine the duties of a UI and UX designer, it creates a separate profile called the visual designer. Now, visual designing refers to creating interfaces that are both visually pleasing and convenient to use. Also, they must respect the voice of a brand. So, visual design skills involve both creativity and programming. So these were the different roles of a web designer. So now that you have understood who is a web developer and who is a web designer, let's find out some more differences between these two. So let's have a look at some key roles of a web developer and a web designer. Now, talking about a web developer, they have to build the user interface using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript languages. The front-end developers can use styling preprocessors, JavaScript libraries, and frameworks to fasten the development. Also, they provide the markup design to back-end developers to implement a dynamic website. After that, the backend developers create the backbone of the website using languages such as PHP and MySQL. The web developers also use versioning tools to keep a history of the previous builds to quickly and effortlessly move back to a previous version. Now, talking about the roles of a web designer, they use software tools such as Adobe Photoshop, Framer, or Sketch to build the final layout design of the website. They also need some good skills in graphic design and logo design. Not just that, a web designer needs to have a good feel for user experience to identify the simplest approach possible to attain the desired function. Apart from that, web designers must keep themselves up to date with the latest design trends. And finally, they also need to keep in mind the branding of the website, color palettes to be used, and the typography and readability of the website. So these were some of the comparison factors of web developer and a web designer. Now let's move on and talk about the salary trends of both these job roles. Now talking about the salary trends, the average web developer salary in India is around 3 lakhs and 8,000 per annum. Whereas when we talk about the average salary of a web developer in US, it is around $59,000. Now, the Glassdoor rates the average base pay for web developers at $93,000 per year. That's much higher than Payscale and Salary.com, which claims a median of around $60,000. Now, the average salary of a web designer in India is around 2,80,000 per annum, which is slightly less than a web developer. The same goes with the average salary of a web designer in US, which is around $49,000 per annum. Even this is slightly less than the average salary of a web developer. So these were the salary comparisons of a web developer and a web designer. And I hope with this you have understood the various differences between these two roles. So even though they work for the web development, the areas are completely different of a web developer and a web designer. And with this, we have come to the end of today's session. I hope you understood all the key differences between these two job profiles and also their roles. So don't forget to let us know about your opinion in the comment section below. Till then, thank you and happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to EduReka channel to learn more. Happy learning!